things change and they're different. And one of the things that happens when you move into the city is that you have all of those peaks and valleys that you were talking about smoothed out to some degree. But there's a memory in it for you. Last year was rainy, this year was dry. And because you have that variation, there's something to remember. For people that have had all those peaks and valleys all smoothed out, it's not that they're doing anything wrong. There's just not much to remember there.
No, and this is not a knock on people who live in the city, because honestly, when I lived in the city and I lived 5 minutes from the grocery store, I could be cooking and I forgot something and I could just go to the grocery store and come back while my food was still in the oven. Here, you have to be a little bit more strategic when you're going to town. Town is 10 minutes away for us, to the local lumber store. If we're going to go grocery shopping, it's 20 minutes away. But if we're going to go to Sam's Club, we're going to go a half an hour away. So there's a lot of conveniences. That's why cities, are formed. There's conveniences there that make sense. And we rely on people in cities, anytime all the companies that we work with are based in a city, and they are employees that we work with are quote unquote city people. So again, we can't function without those city people. They can't function without us. But as that gap gets farther and farther away from people being off the farm, not even having any farm experience, that's starting to make our jobs harder, because those people who don't have any city or farm experience are making rules and regulations that are getting really hard for us to follow and getting in the way of some of our day-to-day practices. So if, people who don't have that farm experience, I just wish they were a little softer and had a little bit more appreciation for the people like me and my neighbors and what we do, and not just hammer down and say, I want my food to do this and say this label. Now, yes, there are those people who live in the cities who are not connected to our farm. They are our customers and they drive what we do. Sometimes it's a little aggressive. Sometimes we have over 100 years of farming experience. It's in our blood. It's in everything that we do. And when, people in the legislature are trying to make rules for us to follow, it's hard to respect that sometimes because that disconnect is so deep.
So let's talk about that. What are some of the, excuse me, what are some of the things that have been going on that you think people in the city, they're trying to do something good by putting in a regulation, but that its ramifications are not fully understood by the people putting the rule in?
So I'm going to tiptoe a little bit because I'm not sure if I'm the perfect person to talk on this, but right now, from my perspective, sustainability is kind of a religion, right? All these companies, you go to a website and you can click a button and you can say, I want my clothes to be sustainably sourced. And I value sustainability so much. My family hasn't been perfect in the sense of 30 years ago, we were probably, 35 years ago, my family adopted no-till. So we've been no-tilling our ground, which means the only thing that we do in our fields is we plant, we spray, we harvest. We're not tearing up the soil. We're not harming it. We leave the trash, which is all the leaves and foliage that comes out of the combine, on the field. We don't touch that. So a lot of times when companies are talking about going sustainability, they're talking about going no-till. And it's like, hey, we've been doing that for 35 years. At one point, we did till our fields. We did disc our fields, but we quickly learned that's not good for it. So in the religion of sustainability, they talk like farmers are starting at zero. We're starting at ground zero. We've never been sustainable, and all of a sudden we got to make ourselves sustainable. Well, sometimes they forget to factor in financial. Sustainability also means being profitable, which sometimes is uncomfortable to talk about. We're a family farm. We are all the feel good things, but we have to be profitable, and we can't be sustainable without being profitable. So right now, something that is really pushed is cover crops. There's a lot of value for cover crops, but cover crops is not just a Band-Aid solution to solve all of our sustainability. So we plant cover crops, but just yesterday, We plant cover crops where we chop silage, because where you chop silage, you're taking the whole ear, you're taking the whole stalk, and not leaving anything behind. So
you're talking about it with corn.
Yes, corn silage.
And what do people use silage for? Just for anybody that doesn't know.
We feed cattle. It's a big part of our cattle ration, because it's just good earage, foliage, all the things. And so when we chop silage, that's taking the whole stalk and not and chopping it up until it almost looks like salad. It's cow salad, essentially cattle salad. That's what the label on the bag when you plant silage corn, it says cow salad. So whoever did that marketing, I appreciate you. So chopping silage, nothing comes out the back. The field is bare. So then we plant cover crop because we don't want any runoff, water runoff on our hills. We're pretty hilly here, or we don't want, a big dust storm or whatever. But this year it's really dry. And so where the cover crop is, the corn is struggling more than where the cover crop wasn't, because that cover crop is taking that moisture that the corn needs right now. So then you got to play the game of like, is it going to be wet year? Is it going to be dry year? So last year it didn't necessarily rain a lot, but 2 years ago it rained a lot and we had a lot of subsoil moisture. So that's why last year was still good, because our soils were still wet. Now this year we've used up all that subsoil moisture and it's not raining. So we're dry this year. So it's just hard when people who are not connected to the farm day to day in production comes and say, you need to do this, this, and this is going to solve all the sustainability issues. Well, that's not the case, because our area looks different than, you go an hour west of us, almost 2 hours west of us, and you hit the Sandhills in Nebraska, which is totally different ecosystem. And they manage their fields and pastures and land way differently than we do. And you go to Iowa, the soil is way different. And you go, anywhere, it doesn't take too far to go and find different soils and different management. So it's just hard to have a conversation of sustainability and talk broadly, because it really depends on specifically down to the field. How has it been managed the last 30 years? What is profitable for this field? It's just a hard one stamp, and it's going to solve all of our sustainability issues.
Yeah, and I think even just the term sustainability, therein lies the challenge. It's he who controls the definition controls the argument. And so if you say this is what sustainability is, and now everybody has to meet that bar, and like you said, well, that might be right on that field, but this field over here is totally different. But if you're just a consumer, really what you want is this good? Is this okay? Yeah. Is this the right thing? And I just want somebody that I can trust to tell me that this is the right thing. And there's a lot of marketing dollars to be made and a lot of sales to be made by having people argue over which is the right one. And in order to know the right answer, you have to get into such specificity that it would seem absurd to the consumer, where they would just be like, I don't need to know that. I just want to know, is it good or is it bad? And yes. I don't see how that will ever be overcome. I think it will be a forever challenge that will be fought between
and that challenge is good
perspectives. Yeah,
because it's always pushing us to be better. But how fast can we adopt things when it's going to, get in the way of productivity or not be profitable? So in fact, I kind of fell victim for the marketing aspect not too long ago. So we've all watched a Netflix documentary and either felt really good about what they were talking about or felt really bad. Well, I've watched all the farming documentaries and none of them really portray what we do in an accurate light. So I recently watched a documentary, I think it was called Seaspiracy. It was on commercial fishing, and it just painted them in a terrible light. And then I got to the end of it, I'm like, I don't even like fish, but I'm not going to eat any more of it. Well, then I got on Instagram and I followed, things were being shared about this is not accurate. And I started following someone who does a family that does commercial fishing, and they were talking about everything that they do. I was like, come on, Hannah, be better than this. Like, I don't like when people fall victims of watching a Netflix documentary on farming that's inaccurate. And yet I just fell for one, just blindly believed everything. Now, I'm sure that documentary has a lot of truth to it, just like a lot of the farming documentaries that we see, but there's a lot of inaccuracies that were painted as well. And so even as someone I know a lot about corn and cattle, but I know nothing about commercial fishing. And that was an opportunity for me to open my eyes and see how easily it is to fall. But another thing about agriculture, like I just said, I'm very knowledgeable in a sense of I know how crops and cattle are grown, but I know nothing about how fruits and nuts and wheat. I don't know how wheat is processed into flour. I still don't know a lot where a lot of my food comes from, if we want to use that term. I'm just trusting that it's families like mine that are doing the best that they can with the tools they have to make a healthy and safe product that gets to the grocery store. Sometimes I fall victim to the marketing tactics as well, because as a communication student, I can appreciate good branding and good marketing. And so when I go to the grocery store, even I'm confused sometimes. And it's like, even with my knowledge that I have, I still have a lot to learn. I still am overwhelmed sometimes. So I feel for those people that are asking the questions because they just want to make the best choice for their family. And it is very confusing. And I'm not sure how we get to the point of we'll never have 100% trust, but I'm not sure how we get to the point where ag is not painted in a bad light. And where people can go to the grocery store confident that whatever they choose is going to be safe and healthy. Do you have any insight on that? Like, do you feel, even with your depth of knowledge, do you ever get stuck in like, man, I'm not exactly sure which direction to choose or go with this?
Well, so that's funny that you would ask that. So I often talk about what you're describing is the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? You've watched one or two documentaries, you've read one book, and so you think we have this sense that like the confidence that you're going to have in what you know happens like over time. I study a little bit, I get a little more confident. I study a little more, I get a little more confident. But that's not actually what happens. What happens is, when you first learn about something, your confidence spikes. You read one book or watch one movie, and then what happens is eventually you hit a point that the more you study something, all of a sudden it comes in conflict with what you thought you already knew, and so your confidence goes down, and that makes you feel really uncomfortable. That's cognitive dissonance, where you're like, oh no, something isn't right. And most of the time...
saying? The more you know, the more you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the more that you start studying, you eventually get to a point, you're 2 years in on chicken farming and you feel like I may never hit the bottom of where there is to know, right? So you have to like go through this very painful process of the more that I'm learning, the less it feels like I understand. The pro is that the Dunning-Kruger effect, these two social scientists figured out, if you keep studying for long enough, eventually your confidence starts to go back up about what you know. And I would say since I have had such a vast experience, I've been invited to go out and speak with people that are tree nut farmers and berries and eggs and all these things. So I've had a chance to meet them all. I overly simplify the good guys versus the bad guys. And the best example I can have is I used to think that the term organic, like I actively went away from it. Like if something said organic, I didn't want anything to do with it because those people were making money off of, lies and it's just not right. Well, we had organic chicken a couple of months ago from the store because it was out of this other kind that I normally get. And we had it and it was awesome. Now, I don't think that it had anything to do with like the food that it was raised. I think they were actually able to raise it to the right size and to do these other things. So I'm not now going out and changing my opinion on organic chicken as a whole, but I do know that one particular brand is really good. And I don't really care that they call it organic. I just want the one that was really, really good. And that was hard for me. I remember having to back off some of the things I'd told my wife about organic or about, the different ways they label chicken. And so it was really good for me to remember like, hey, it's not just marketing on one side that's tilting the floor. It's everybody. And I think like to your point about, will this go on forever? I think it goes on in any domain where there are options where you can say, I could buy this thing or I could buy that thing, right? There's a reason that everybody knows the name Foxconn, and it's because the people that aren't making Apple iPhones in those Foxconn factories are making them somewhere else, and it really benefits them if they think, hey, slave labor and people that are killing themselves are doing it because at the Apple factories, but not at our Android factories, right? So this goes on in every domain that there is. And if it isn't going on, it's going to soon as there's a competitor in a marketplace. Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.